It is a mortifying thing for a man to discover that he's been telling a barefaced lie all the days of his life. That's Mark Twain.
Powerful quote.
It really is. And it speaks volumes, doesn't it, about that discomfort when we face realities that just shatter what we thought we knew, or maybe an idealized view of things.
Absolutely.
Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. This is where we commit to really peeling back the layers on social issues, the pressing ones that, frankly, demand our attention.
Our unflinching attention.
Exactly. And today we're taking a critical deep dive into something alarming, deeply entrenched, the reality of dowry in India. And our focus, prompted by a recent piece in the print, is going to be particularly on how it plays out within the Indian Muslim community.
Which is often overlooked.
It is. And look, this isn't just about stats and numbers. It's about lived experiences, systemic problems, and, well, some very uncomfortable truths that often get swept under the rug.
And our mission today is precisely that, to try and dissect how a practice illegal since 1961, okay, and explicitly called a sin in Islam.
Explicit.
How it continues to not just exist, but to, well, tragically thrive, causing immense, just heartbreaking harm.
Yeah.
And for you listening, maybe you're a UPSC aspirant, prepping hard for mains and prelims, or perhaps you're just someone keen to understand current social issues better.
Which is crucial for everyone, really.
It is. This topic is vital. It offers real insight into the complexities of societal change, how harmful norms persist, and that powerful, tricky interplay between law, religion, and social practice.
Okay, let's unpack this then. It's a societal issue that demands our critical thought. We need to look at it honestly.
Agreed. Where should we start? The human cost.
Let's start there, with the stark reality, the anecdotes that really just hit home. Take Aamina from Jalon in Uttar Pradesh.
I read about that case. Horrifying.
It's chilling. Her story, it made local papers. A young woman allegedly thrown off a roof by her husband, Arif, and his family.
And why?
Her crime? Her family couldn't meet a dowry demand? 10 lakh rupees?
10 lakh.
And reports said she'd been beaten. The source used the words, like an animal? It's hard to even say.
It is. And Amina's story, as awful as it is, highlights that it's not just some isolated incident, is it? It's a symptom of something much wider.
Exactly. A brutal illustration.
And that brings us to the broader context, right?
Sure.
How systemic this remains, even with the law. I mean, think about that study. Researchers looked at, 40,000 marriages in rural India?
Yeah, between 1960 and 2008.
Right. And they found dowry was paid in 95% of them. 95%.
That's staggering, especially considering the 1961 Dowry Prohibition Act.
Precisely. This wasn't before the law. This is after. So, as the print article rightly argues, this isn't just some, loophole.
Right.
It points to a whole system, a system where social norms, social pressures just completely overrides the legal ban. The law exists, sure, but its actual impact limited. Severely limited by just how ingrained the practice is.
And the human cost of this persistent system, it's devastating. We're not just talking abstract figures. The NCRB data, over 6,000 dowry-related deaths officially registered in 2022.
Over 6,000 in 1 year.
Just think about that. 6,000 women burned, beaten, silenced, their lives just extinguished over these demands. It's a tragic measure of how deep this problem runs.
And what strikes me reading the analysis is the significant gap in the national conversation around this.
How so?
Well, everyone acknowledges generally that dowry happens across all communities in India, right? All religions.
Sure, it's widespread.
But there seems to be a real lack of focused attention or data or even, honest public discussion about its prevalence specifically within Indian Muslim communities. The Pasmanda Muslim perspective highlighted this. This oversight means hardly any data gets collected specifically on this. There's barely a whisper about it in public discourse, and definitely no real reckoning with how dowry harms Muslim women.
It's like that Mark Twain quote again. The barefaced lie we avoid confronting.
Exactly. It often gets bypassed, denied, or met with silence.
And that silence has terrible consequences. We can't forget Aisha Banu, Ahmedabad.
Oh, yes. The video.
4 years ago, a 23-year-old woman took her own life, left that video message explicitly detailing the dowry harassment she endured.
It went viral, didn't it? Haunted so many people.
It did. Her face, her plea. But, as the source points out, did any real systemic change follow? Apparently, very little.
So these stories, Aamina, Aisha Banu, the thousands unnamed bind, they aren't just sad anecdotes. They're reflections of this brutal, persistent reality we're talking about.
Right. So, okay, if we see this horrific reality, why is it so hard to tackle? especially as the print piece focuses on within the Indian Muslim community. When you bring it up, what's the reaction?
Often, it's immediate defensiveness. You hear things like, but dowry is a sin in Islam.
Right. It's haram, it's impermissible, we don't support it, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It's a very common, almost knee-jerk reaction.
Oh.
A way, perhaps, to deflect from this really uncomfortable truth on the ground.
And that's the core of the contradiction, isn't it? The gap between the theory and the practice.
It's precisely where that disconnect becomes so glaring. Quoting scripture. Look, it's fundamental to the faith, of course, but it doesn't magically erase the torture, the suicide, the murder we just discussed.
It can't.
And worse, this defensive posture, as the article argues, it actually fosters a culture of collective silence and negligence.
How does it do that?
Well, it creates an environment where the problem persists, but no one feels personally responsible. It's like Islam forbids it, so we don't do it, even while it's happening all around. It allows the harm to continue under this sort of cloak of religious correctness that doesn't match reality.
A dangerous denial.
A very dangerous denial. A comfortable lie, maybe, that stops real action.
So it's really crucial then to clarify the actual Islamic concepts here. What does Islam actually say?
Okay, so Islam has the concept of meher, M-E-H-E-R, sometimes called dower.
Right.
This is the mandatory gift, or a sum of money promised by the groom to the bride when they marry. It's her absolute right. She owns it. She can demand it.
So it flows from the groom to the bride.
Correct. And it is explicitly, definitively not the same as dowry. Dowry, as practiced, flows the other way, from the bride's family to the groom's, and dowry has no mandatory concept, no religious sanction in Islam like meher does.
So the texts are clear. Dowry is outside the Islamic marriage contract.
Unequivocally. But what's fascinating and really troubling is how this practice of dowry actively subverts other Islamic principles, specifically women's inheritance rights.
How does that work?
Well, Islam actually grants women clear rights to inherit property, which was quite progressive and still relevant. However, in practice, in many parts of India, that future inheritance right is effectively, well, traded away at the time of marriage. It's given as jahez, which is the word often used for dowry items given to the daughter.
So jahez is seen as her share.
Effectively, yes. And once those goods, or cash, or whatever it is, enters the husband's household, it stops being seen as hers alone. It becomes something the in-laws, the husband's siblings, even other relatives, feel they have a claim on. They feel entitled to it. It completely twists the concept of her right, her ownership.
And strips her of a future claim too, presumably.
Exactly. It's often used to deny her any later share in her parental property.
Wow. And this is where that misplaced religious justification comes in, right? The jahazi fatimi term.
Precisely. People try to legitimize these huge dowry demands by referencing the very modest trousseau given to the Prophet's daughter, Fatima.
But that was modest, wasn't it? Basic household items.
Extremely modest, utilitarian things. What we see today, it's a world apart. Lavish goods, designer clothes, cars, huge amounts of cash being negotiated.
Negotiations.
Yes, explicit demands. And then there's the pressure for grand hospitality for the barat, the groom's entire wedding party. Hundreds of people sometimes.
So none of that is genuinely religious.
Not in origin. It's pure social pressure. Maybe dressed up, as the article says, in misplaced religious justification. An attempt to make something transactional and exploitative seem acceptable, pious even.
It's given a religious veneer.
A very thin one. And the standard practice that emerges is insidious. Daughters get dowry instead of inheritance.
In lieu of it.
Yes. With the expectation, sometimes unspoken, often very explicit, that she can never ask for anything else from her parental home.
So her rights are effectively canceled out?
Correct. I've seen cases, and the article mentions this too, where if a Muslim woman later dares to ask for her rightful share of inheritance, as per Islamic law,
what happens?
She's immediately reminded, remember how much we spent on your wedding, remember the dowry we gave, as if that cancels her actual legal and religious rights.
It's emotional blackmail, basically.
And more. She's often warned, subtly or directly, if you pursue this inheritance claim, you'll break ties with the family. You'll lose relationships. It's a powerful tool of control. It erodes her agency, her rights.
It's such a tragic irony, isn't it? Because you often hear parts of the community strongly defending Sharia law when, say, the Uniform Civil Code is discussed.
Passionately defending it, often framing it as protective of women's rights within the faith.
Right. But then, as the article puts it, they won't blink twice when it comes to snatching away rights already given to women under Sharia. like inheritance.
It's a profound hypocrisy, a massive inconsistency that needs to be confronted if there's any hope for real change. It is perhaps that barefaced lie Twain talked about, lived out daily.
Which leads us to, well, what's the path forward if practice is so far removed from theory?
This brings us to a crucial point the article makes. Laws and societal approaches for Indian Muslim women need to be based on social realities, not just an idealized version of Sharia.
Because the lived experience is just so different.
It's far removed from the textbook version, as the author puts it. We can't just quote scripture and wish the problem away when the reality on the ground involves coercion, violence, and the stripping of rights. Ignoring this gap just allows the suffering to continue.
You really can't build justice on theory alone when the practice is so deeply broken. It's like building on quicksand, isn't it?
Exactly. And look, enforcement of the existing anti-dowry law is a huge challenge across the board. We know that.
Monumental.
But the article suggests an even bigger battle, maybe, is getting society itself, including within the community, to accept the need for reform in the first place.
To acknowledge the problem exists and it's internal.
Yes. And that requires a huge shift, a willingness to confront those uncomfortable truths we started with.
So enforcement is one piece, but societal acceptance, that's the deeper challenge.
Absolutely. Because the enforcement challenge is massive, partly because the problem isn't just about laws. It's about these deep-seated social norms, community expectations, the whole fabric of how things are done. So the real battle isn't just tweaking laws. It's about changing minds, igniting a shift in thinking, challenging the conditioning that makes dowry seem normal or even necessary.
How do you even begin to do that?
Well, it's multifaceted, isn't it? Empowering women economically is key. So marriage isn't seen as the only path to security. Education is vital, not just general education, but education about the actual Islamic principles on women's rights, mehr versus dowry.
Making that distinction crystal clear.
Crystal clear. And crucially, you need the active involvement of religious scholars, community leaders.
That's a really important point. If they say dowry is a sin,
then they have a huge responsibility, don't they? Not just to condemn it occasionally from the pulpit, but to actively educate people, explain mehr, contrast it sharply with dowry's predatory nature, encourage simpler weddings that are genuinely in line with Islamic values.
Without their consistent voice, the message just stays theoretical for many people, probably doesn't overcome family pressure.
Exactly. It needs to be a constant, clear message from those in positions of influence.
And what about action from the ground up?
That's the other vital piece. Grassroots movements, women's advocacy groups within the community, they're the ones often doing the really hard work, supporting victims, raising awareness locally, pushing for accountability.
Breaking that culture of collective silence you mentioned.
Yes, creating safe spaces to even talk about it, challenging the power structures that let dowry demands flourish. But make no mistake, they face immense pushback, often from within their own families and communities.
So it's a tough road. Stronger enforcement, education, leadership, grassroots action. It sounds like a lot needs to happen.
It does.
But that resistance you mentioned, the discomfort with internal critique, that seems like a huge barrier. Why is it so hard for communities, any community maybe, to acknowledge internal problems that cause harm? Is it fear of criticism from outside?
It's often a complex mix, I think. That's the uncomfortable truth, maybe. Sometimes, yes, it's a genuine fear that admitting internal problems will be weaponized by those outside, used to stereotype everyone.
Okay, that makes sense.
Other times, it's just inertia, tradition. Dowry has become so normalized, so tangled up with social status, ideas about marital security, that challenging it feels like attacking identity itself, even if it's harmful.
Even if it contradicts core principles.
Even then. So the challenge is to frame reform not as an external attack, but as maybe an act of internal purification, aligning practice back with the true principles of justice and dignity that are central to the faith itself.
That's a powerful way to put it. Reform as internal alignment, not external criticism.
It has to come from within, ultimately.
Yeah, and that really brings us to the core, doesn't it? This is fundamentally a battle for hearts and minds, a struggle to put justice and compassion above the weight of damaging social customs.
Absolutely. And what's truly striking, looking back at our discussion, is just how powerfully social norms can override both clear laws and deeply held religious beliefs.
That's quite something.
The core challenge we've unpacked today is that profound, often tragic, gap between legal rules, religious teachings, and the entrenched reality of dowry on the ground, which keeps silencing, harming, even killing women, despite being condemned by both law and faith. It really is a testament to the power of that barefaced lie we began with and how hard it is to confront.
So, wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you listening? Whether you're deep in UPSC prep or just want to be a more informed citizen.
Which is vital.
It is. We've looked at how deep-seated dowry is, despite being illegal, despite being condemned by religion. We focused on its presence and the surrounding silence within the Indian Muslim community. And we've highlighted that critical, often uncomfortable, need to look at social realities, not just idealized theories. Understanding this is crucial for anyone trying to grasp complex societal issues, the nuances of governance, and frankly, for developing critical thinking.
And perhaps it leaves us all with a final critical question to think about, one that goes beyond just this issue.
What's up?
How can any society truly achieve justice, achieve reform, when uncomfortable truths are met with denial, with collective silence, especially when that silence comes from within its own communities?
That's a heavy question, something for all of us to consider, definitely.
It's a challenge to our collective conscience, perhaps.
And for you, particularly UPSC aspirants, digging into topics like this, the interplay of law, religion, social norms, their real-world impact, it's absolutely critical. For mains current affairs, yes, but important for prelims thinking, too.
It's about understanding the why behind the headlines.
Exactly. It's not just memorizing facts, it's appreciating the complexities. We really encourage you to continue your own deep dive into critical issues like these.
You question them.
Definitely. And if this deep dive sparked some new thoughts or insights for you, please do like, subscribe, and maybe leave a comment. Let us know your thoughts or if you have more questions. Your engagement genuinely helps us bring more critical discussions like this to light.